The first thing that went wrong was the sound. Not alarms, not radio, not the usual offshore bullshit. Some deckhand dropping a shackle and everybody flinching like it's gunfire. Just this slow, dumb ping in the comms loop like somebody was tapping a spoon on the inside of my skull. 2 quick knocks, a pause, then 1 long. I yanked my headset off so hard the foam pad tore a little. I checked the patch bay, swapped channels, reseated the damn connector until my fingers smelled like hot plastic. I cursed at the intercom, at the SAT system, and my own cheap nerves. Put back on. Same fucking ping. Not steady either. It had patience. Like it was waiting for me to answer. Like it knew I'd get curious, because that's what we do out there. We stare at the dark and pretend we're in charge of it. We were 8 miles off anything that mattered, floating on a cold slab of Atlantic, on a chartered DSV that smelled like diesel, coffee, and wet neoprene. No glamour, no exploration, just a maintenance job, a damaged fiber optic trunk cable that fed half the coastline its internet, and a company contract that came with a clock attached. We had a saturation system bolted to the deck like a parasite, a cylindrical chamber stack, transfer lock, control console, gas racks, hot water unit, the whole steel tumor welded into the ship's spine. Dive bell hanging off the A-frame, glossy black with scuffs that never came out. It sat over water, so dark it didn't even look like water. It looked like the ocean had opened its mouth and was holding still. 3 guys lived in that steel for weeks at a time. They slept in bunks the size of coffins, ate reheated slop through a hatch, pissed into bags, breathed helium until their voices went cartoon. They came out the end pale, wrinkled, and shaking like newborn animals. That's saturation. You trade your body to pressure and hope the math holds. I didn't get the hero part. I was topside sat control, the guy with the screens. I watched numbers, log vitals, track depth, chamber pressure, PO2, CO2, humidity. I listened to the divers breathing and try to keep it boring. My job was to hear the little changes before they became big funerals. The ping wasn't in the water at first. It wasn't a sonar return. It was inside our comms loop, inside the line that ran from my console to the bell, from the bell to the umbilicals, to the divers' hats, to their ears. 2 quick. Pause. 1 long. I checked the bell comms recorder. Nothing flagged. No interference. No open mic. Just that stupid pattern sitting under the static like a heartbeat in somebody else's chest. The supervisor, call him Vince because there's always a Vince, leaned over my shoulder and grunted. You got the bell checks done? We dropping in 20. I didn't look away from the waveform. I'm hearing something on the loop. He snorted. You're hearing a ship, that's what you're hearing. Everything out here makes noise. You knew. I've been offshore 5 years. Not new, just tired of pretending. But Vince didn't like anybody who sounded cautious. Caution slows money. It's a pattern, I said. 2 short, 1 long. He stared like I told him I saw ghosts. It's probably a loose ground. Fix it. I've been fixing it. Fix harder, he said and walked off. The deck rolled under my chair in a slow, sick sway. Outside the SAT control container, the wind slapped the hull and made the whole ship groan like an old man shifting in bed. The air inside smelled of electronics and stale sweat. The AC fought humidity that never lost. We sent the ROV down first. Routine sweep. They wanted to confirm the cable route before we dropped the bell. The job plan was clean on paper. Find the damaged section, clear the silt, clamp the new segment, test continuity, go home. Offshore plans always look like that. Straight lines and happy arrows. ROV never goes like that. It's a robot on a tether being flown by a guy hunched over a monitor, drinking bad coffee, trying to pretend he isn't basically playing a video game where people die if he screws up. The ROV pilot was a skinny kid named Marsh who had the permanent posture of someone who slept in a chair. He had a nicotine patch on one arm and a chewed pen cap at his mouth. Dropping, he said, and the camera feed filled with bubbles and green murk. I leaned forward despite myself. Everybody does. The ocean turns you into a kid again. It makes you stare. At 50 meters, the green started to go black. At 100, the black got thicker, like the water was getting heavier. The ROV's lights cut cones through it, picking up drifting junk, plastic bags that looked like jellyfish, long strings of kelp, a dead fish that had the wrong eyes for daylight. The cable route marker showed up as a faint line on the sonar overlay. Marsh nudged the thrusters, the ROV tilting like a cautious animal, and the seabed appeared in the light. Silt plains, scattered rocks, old trawl scars like claw marks dragged through mud. Dead zone, Marsh muttered. No structure. We watched it creep forward. I watched my SAT control screens too, because that's how my brain worked, split attention, always waiting for something to spike. The divers were still in the chamber, pre-breathing, getting their heads right. Their vitals were fine. Bored. Stable. The kind of stability you pray for. The ping came again in my headset. Too quick. Pause. One long. I checked the clock. Every time it happened, it fell just off the minute, like it wasn't tied to any system tick. Like it had its own sense of time. At 200 meters, the ROV's lights caught something flat. At first it looked like nothing. Just a smooth plane at a slight angle, half buried in silt. Marsh adjusted, swung around, and the thing stayed wrong. It didn't look like rock. It didn't look like wreck. It didn't look like the cable. It looked like someone slid a giant sheet of mirror down there and forgot it. Not literal mirror, not like you'd see your face in it. It didn't reflect the ROV's lights the way metal does, with bloom and scatter. It swallowed them. The beams hit it and died for a second, then snapped back at the camera hard, like a flashbulb right in your eyes. Ich blinkade fast. My eyes watered. I tasted something metallic like I'd bitten my tongue. Marsh whistled quietly. The hell is that? On the monitor, the ROV drifted closer. The edges of the thing were too clean. No rivets, no seams, no marine growth. Down there, everything grows fur. Barnacles, tube worms, slime, a living skin that covers anything man-made in weeks. This thing stayed bald, polished, like it hated being touched. Vince's voice crackled through the container speaker from the deck radio. What you got? Marsh didn't answer right away. He was doing that thing pilots do, small adjustments, little breath holds, trying to make a picture make sense. It's flat, Marsh said. Some kind of plating? It's not on the chart. Vince came in, boots thudding, and leaned in. He did that fake calm voice that makes my teeth itch. Could be hull, old barge, could be anything. Give me cable confirmation. It's not the cable, I said without meaning to. Vince glanced at me like I'd farted. Your SAT control. I know what the cable looks like on sonar, I snapped. And I know what corrosion looks like. That's clean. He shrugged like clean meant safe. Clean is good. Clean means it's not our problem. Move past it. Marsh tried. He pushed the ROV sideways to skirt the thing. The thrusters kicked up silt, and the monitor filled with snow for a second. Then the silt cleared and the camera caught the surface again. And for one frame, one shitty frame, the mirror wasn't showing itself. It was showing open water on the other side. Not behind it. Through it. Different water. Different kind of dark. The ROV's lights hit it, and the space beyond didn't respond like our ocean. It wasn't emptiness. It was depth that looked older. The black had texture to it, like smoke. For that one frame, I saw something like a faint drift of lights. Tiny points, too regular to be plankton, moving in a slow line as if a current had rules. Then it snapped back to flat. Smooth. But my stomach did a slow roll. Marsh rewound the feed, fingers trembling a little. Did you see that? I didn't answer because my throat went tight. The ping in my headset came again. Right on cue, like it liked being noticed. Too quick. Pause. One long. Vinches threatened. Stop rewinding. Keep moving. We're burning daylight. It's night, Marsh said, because outside the container window the sky was already bruised and the deck lights were on. Vince ignored him. Get the route. We're dropping bell. Marsh did as told. He nudged the ROV along the seabed until the cable appeared, half buried, coated in slime, running like a dull vein through mud. He followed it, confirmed the damage point, a section where it had lifted and kinked, probably snagged by a trawler. The fix was straightforward, which should have been a relief. It wasn't, because every time the ROV swung its camera the wrong way, the flat thing was there, just at the edge of light, like a blind eye waiting for attention. I tried to tell myself it was a piece of wreck, an old hatch cover, a slab of something. But the one frame through it kept replaying in my head like a tongue poking a sore tooth. We brought the ROV up. The feed cut to black. The container felt suddenly too quiet, like the ocean had been whispering and then stopped. Vince clapped his hands once. All right, bell down. Get your people ready. My people like I own them, like they were parts. The divers were in the chamber stack, suited up in their undersuits, helmets prepped in the bell. They'd been living in helium for 11 days. Their voices came through my headset high and weird, like cartoon chipmunks trying to sound tough. Diver 1 was an old Scottish bastard named Cal who'd been underwater longer than I'd been alive. Diver 2 was Jonas, quiet, muscular, the kind of guy who never wastes words. Diver 3, Bellman, was Reese, young, twitchy, always cracking his knuckles. They were calm because that's what professionals do. They were calm because fear gets you killed faster than depth does. But calm doesn't mean nothing gets under your skin. I keyed comms. Bell check, audio check. Cal's helium voice squeaked back, loud and tinny, like always. Reese, Bell life support green. Hatch seals good. Hot water good. Umbilicals clear. Jonas didn't say anything right away. Then, copy. His breathing came through steady. I watched his heart rate, 62. Good. Better than mine. The ping came again. Too quick. Pause. One long. I pulled my headset off for a second and listened to the container itself. I could hear the ship, the generator, the AC fan. I could hear the distant slap of waves against hull. No ping. Headset back on. Ping. It was in the loop. In the wire. In their ears. In mine. Bell deployment is all procedure. The crane operator lifts, the bell swings, the splash zone crew guides it, and then it disappears under the surface, swallowed by black. On my depth gauge, the bell started descending. 10 meters, 20, 50, 100. The water column pressed down like a hand. I watched the umbilical tension. I watched the gas flow. I watched the divers breathing. Everything normal. Then, at 200 meters, the ping pattern in my headset shifted slightly. It got clearer, less like interference, more like something tapping metal. Too quick. Pause. One long. Cal. Got bottom in sight. Mudplane. Reese. Bell steady. Jonas. Cable ahead. Their helmet cams fed into my monitors. 3 shaky cones of light cutting through black. Still drifting like smoke. The seabed was dead and flat, and it should have been boring. Then Jonas's light swung and caught the flat thing. Even through the shitty compression and the helmet cam glare, I felt it like seeing a familiar face in the wrong place. The mirror sheet lay half-buried exactly where the ROV saw it, angled up slightly like it wanted to look. Cal's voice. That's the plating the kids saw. Reese. Looks like a door. Vince's voice came over radio in my container, sharp. Ignore it. Clamp the cable. Cal snurta. I boss. Ignoring the big, shiny, weird thing. Jonas didn't comment. He just drifted closer. Slow kicks, controlled, like he was being pulled by the idea of it more than current. Jonas, I said into comms. Maintain task. Cable first. He didn't answer. His breathing stayed steady. Too steady. On my screen, his gloved hand hovered a foot from the mirror surface. The light reflected weirdly, not like glare, more like the beam got swallowed and then returned with a hard edge. The water around it looked wrong, like the black thickened near the surface and refused to mix. Then my system flagged something that made my skin go cold. A second breathing pattern on Jonas's channel. Same tone, same like signature, half a second delayed. Like an echo that was trying to be him. My fingers went to the comms panel automatically. I checked crosstalk. Nothing. I checked other channels. Clean. The echo was only on him. Jonas, I said again louder. Back off that thing. Cal. Jonas, what the hell are you doing? No reply, just breathing. 2 breaths, pause, 1 long exhale, matching the ping pattern. I stared at the waveform, my eyes flicking between lines like I could catch it lying. 2 quick, pause, 1 long. Jonas's helmet cam caught the mirror's surface fully now. I could see his outline in it, his own reflection, faint, distorted by water and angle. Except it didn't match. The reflection moved wrong. Not like a camera lag, like the shape was built from the idea of Jonas instead of Jonas himself. The shoulder bent like it had an extra joint. The head tilt was off by a fraction, like it was practicing the angle. Cal's voice got tight. That's not right. Reese, Control, you seeing this? I'm seeing it, I said, and my voice sounded thin even to me. The ping hit my ears again. 2 quick, pause, 1 long. It didn't feel like sound anymore. It felt like pressure behind my eyes. Cal tried to grab Jonas by the harness. He didn't do drama, just reached out and hooked a gloved fist into the D-ring at Jonas's shoulder and hauled. Jonas resisted. Not a fight, not a shove, just dead weight at first, like he forgot how legs worked. Then a sudden jerk, like something on the other side of the mirror yanked him. His tether went tight. The line angle changed. Reese and the bell started hauling, hands working the umbilical reel. Jonas, Cal snapat. Back to the bell. Jonas finally spoke. Stop. He didn't sound panicked. He sounded irritated, like someone had woken him up mid-dream. 2 back to bell, I said. Right now. He didn't answer me. He turned his light fully on the mirror, and the reflection opened its mouth. There was no mouth movement on Jonas. His helmet cam showed his face behind the visor. Calm, lips barely parted, eyes fixed. But in the mirror's surface, the thing shaped like him open wide. Teeth showed too clearly for underwater. Bright, dry-looking human teeth, lined up like a grin from a fucking dentist advertisement. The mouth moved in a silent cadence that matched the echo breathing pattern, half a second delayed, like it was copying. Cal swore hard. Jesus Christ. Reese, Control, what is that? I didn't have an answer. I had my stomach climbing up my throat and my hands sweating on the console. The ping came again, and this time it felt like it was inside the bell itself. 2 quick. Pause. 1 long. Cal yanka Jonas out of the. Jonas's glove slapped the mirror. The feed blew out white. Not static, not snow, pure white, like somebody pointed the camera into the sun. Every monitor in my container stuttered. The ping in my headset became a hard buzzing like a dentist drill digging into enamel. My eyes watered instantly. I gagged and tasted copper like blood, even though my mouth was dry. I tore the headset off, but it didn't help. The buzzing felt like it was in the air, in my teeth, in the steel walls. Then the feed snapped back. Jonas floated free, tether slack. Cal had him by the shoulder, hauling him back toward the bell. The mirror showed nothing now, just flat dark like it had gone blind. Return to bell, I said, and my voice didn't sound like mine in my own ears. It sounded like someone trying to remember how I spoke. Cal, coming. Reese, hatch open. They got back into the bell, clumsy with adrenaline, movements faster than they should have been at depth. The hatch sealed. Reese started the ascent. I watched chamber pressure. I watched heart rates. Cal's pulse was up. Reese's was up. Jonas's was perfect. No spike. No adrenaline surge. No fear. His heart rate sat steady like he'd been meditating. Blood oxygen perfect. CO2 normal. No tremor on the respiration curve. After a scare like that, you expect the body to shout. His body stayed quiet. That quiet scared me more than the mirror. The ascent took time, slow and controlled. The bell rose through black water like a coffin being pulled up from a grave. When it breached the surface, deck lights hit it and water poured off in sheets. The splash zone crew hooked it in, guided it onto the deck cradle. I heard the bell hatch bolts through the deck mic, clunks and squeals, and then the divers' voices got clearer as they came into the chamber transfer lock. Vince came into my container again, face flushed, jaw clenched. What the fuck was that? Why do we lose feed? Jonas touched something. I said. Touched a plate. Vinches nipped. Touched a goddamn plate and your system's freaked out. This is why I hate electronics. We're losing time. Time. I stared at him. You saw it. His reflection moved wrong. Vince's eyes flicked away for a second. A crack of something. Maybe doubt, maybe fear, then slammed shut. Undervatir, optikistu vivchich. Refraction. Move on. Cal's voice came over comms from inside the bell. Hoarse even through helium. Boss, that was not refraction. Vince ignored him, like you ignore a barking dog if you decided it's annoying. Transfer them. Keep them on task. We're finishing this. The bellman reported a cut on Jonas's glove. He brushed something sharp. I asked to see it on camera. They angled the internal bell cam down. The glove had a slit across the palm, clean as a razor. No frying, no tearing. Just a line like a knife had kissed it. I expected blood. There wasn't any. Jonas flexed his hand inside the glove like it was nothing. He didn't even look at it. The transfer lock hissed as pressure equalized. The divers crawled from bell to chamber, dragging their umbilicals, bodies heavy with depth fatigue. They moved like men who'd done this 1,000 times. But Jonas moved like a man walking into his kitchen. We got them into the SAT chamber. Hatch sealed, locks engaged. The system settled into its constant hiss, that steady breath of compressors and scrubbers that becomes your world when you live in steel. Inside saturation, there's nowhere to run. It's tubes and hatches and steel walls and the constant mechanical whisper of keeping you alive. You can't open a door for fresh air. You can't step outside. If something is wrong in there, it is wrong with you. I watched Jonas on the internal cam. He stripped his gloves off. That's when I saw it. A thin white film on his palm, like he'd pressed his hand into wet plastic and peeled it away. It clung in threads between his fingers. Not skin, not slime, more like a membrane, translucent and shiny under the chamber light. Jonas looked at it the way people look at hair stuck in a drain. Annoyed, he scraped it off with his thumbnail and flicked it onto the deck grating. The film didn't fall. It crawled, just a centimeter, just enough to make me swear out loud and smack the camera zoom button like that would change reality. Cal saw it too. He stepped forward and stomped it hard. The film flattened, then peeled itself up at the edges and tried to slide under his boot like it was looking for a seam. Cal's voice, high helium, pure rage, came over the chamber mic. No, you're not doing that. He grabbed a wrench from the tool rack and smashed it. The film splattered, no blood, no guts, just a wet sheen like oil on water, and then it stopped moving. Jonas watched the whole thing without reacting. Then he smiled, quick and small, like he'd seen a joke nobody else got. I felt the hair lift on my arms. I keyed the intercom. Medical check. Now. Jonas leaned toward the chamber mic and said, "We're fine. We're." It was a stupid little word. It shouldn't matter, but hit me wrong. Like he'd forgotten he was one person. Cal barked, "Don't we me, Jonas?" "You all right?" Jonas didn't answer Cal. He just stared at the camera lens for a beat. Dead center, like he knew exactly where I sat. I pulled the live CO2 graph up and watched Jonas breathe. His exhale pattern had a hitch in it, tiny, rhythmic. 2 quick pause, 1 long, like his lungs were learning a code. I try to talk myself down. Stress, narcosis hangover. The mind does weird stuff after a scare. Helium makes people act odd. I've seen divers cry because a spoon looked sad. I've seen them laugh until they puked because a radio song hit wrong. But I'd never seen a man's body refuse fear. Vince came on the SAC control radio again. "What's the status? Can they go back down when they're arrested?" "They're not going back down," I said. His voice sharpened. "You don't make that call. I do if I think they're contaminated." "Contaminated with what?" "See ghosts. Vinches nept. We've got a weather window, we've got a contract, and we've got divers who are paid to work, not to act like scared kids." I stood up so fast my chair rolled back and hit the wall. Jonas has something on his hand that crawled. Silence for half a second. Then Vince, slower. "Did it bite him?" No. Did it poison him? I don't know. Then shut up and do your job, Vince said. Watch your numbers. Keep your gas right. Let the men work. I stared at the radio like I could burn it. Offshore work teaches you that money speaks louder than fear until fear starts breaking bones. Vince hadn't seen bones break yet. He thought he was still in charge. We put them on rest cycle. You can't just shove divers back down after an adrenaline event, even if Vince wanted to. You give them time, let their breathing settle, let their heads clear. Cal and Reese ate in the chamber, squeezing food pouches like astronauts. They didn't talk much. Cal kept rubbing his boot sole like he still felt the membrane under it. Reese kept glancing at Jonas like he expected him to sprout gills. Jonas ate like normal. Slow, clean, no shaking hands. Then he went to sleep in the bunk. I didn't. I sat in sat control with my coffee going cold and my eyes burning from staring at screens. The ship rolled. The sat system hissed. The ocean slapped the hull like it was bored. Every few minutes, the ping came back in my headset. Too quick. Pause. One long. I tried switching headsets. Same. I tried listening to a different comms path. Same. I unplugged my headset entirely and held the jack near my ear like an idiot. The ping still came faintly, like the line itself carried it. At 2:13, because I remember the time like it's tattooed, I saw Jonas sit up in the chamber dark. The internal camera was low light, grainy. The bunk area glowed with a dim red night light, just enough to keep them oriented without blasting their circadian rhythm. The chamber walls looked slick with condensation. They always do. A sealed steel tube full of breathing men's sweats. Jonas swung his legs down and stood barefoot on the grating. He didn't look sleepy. He didn't rub his eyes. He moved like he'd been called. He walked to the chamber wall, right where the steel curved into the hatch frame, and pressed his palm flat against it. He held it there like he was listening through his skin. Kel rolled over in his bunk and muttered something I couldn't make out. Reese snored softly. Jonas didn't care. At 2:14, the chamber wall answered. Not with sound, with movement. The metal dimpled inward, just a shallow flex like someone outside pressed a thumb into it. My stomach dropped so hard it felt like I'd lost altitude. That's impossible. There's nothing outside a sat chamber but air, ship structure, and more ship. No water, no hands, no creatures, no other side. Jonas pressed again. The wall pressed back. A gentle push, a slow acknowledgement, like a door being tested. I grabbed Vince's shoulder on the deck 30 seconds later, dragged him toward my container like I was hauling a drunk. He cursed and tried to shake me off. What? He snapped. What now? I shoved his face at the monitor. Look. On screen, Jonas's hand was still on the wall. The steel dimpled again, subtle but real. The camera didn't glitch. The pixels didn't smear. The whole surface moved. Vince stared for a long second. His mouth tightened. Then he did exactly what men like him always do when reality threatens their paperwork. That's the camera, he said. It's not. It's the camera, or vibration, or pressure shift. There at sat pressure, the steel flexes. It doesn't flex like a thumbprint, I said, and my voice came out sharper than I meant. I've run sat control for 5 years. I've watched these walls for thousands of hours. That doesn't happen. Vince's eyes flicked sideways. I saw fear try to surface and then get punched down by stubbornness. You're tired. Go get coffee. Stop acting like a bitch and spooking the men. I laughed once, ugly. I'm not spooking them. Jonas is doing this. Vince leaned closer to the screen like proximity could make it harmless. Jonas's palm slid slightly, tracing the curve of the hatch frame, like he was mapping it. And then Jonas turned his head, slow, and looked straight into the camera lens. Not at the wall, not around the chamber, at the lens, at me. The ping at my ears, so clean it made my eyes water. Too quick. Pause. One long. Then step back. He knows he's on camera. They all do weird shit when they're bored. Jonas lifted his hand from the wall. The thumbprint dent didn't spring back right away. It held for a second, like the steel remembered. Then it smoothed out. Jonas walked to the hatch and rested his fingers on the wheel. Not turning it. Not yet. Just touching it. Vince exhaled hard. See? Nothing. He's messing with you. I didn't answer. My mouth tasted like copper again, like my body was trying to warn me in the only language it had. I walked back into the container and sat down. My hands hovered over the controls. I stared at the comms panel, the isolation switches, the locks. Cutting internal comms is a big no-no. You don't isolate divers unless there's fire or contamination. You don't make them feel trapped. Trapet divers panique. Panic kills. But I wasn't worried about their feelings anymore. I was worried about whatever the fuck had learned how to press back through steel. On the monitor, Jonas's fingers tightened slightly on the hatch wheel, like he was testing its willingness. The pings sounded again, not just in my headset now, down in the SAT system piping, in the deck plates under my boots, and the thin bones behind my eyes. Too quick. Pause. One long. I reached for the comms cutoff. My fingertips shook. The switch was just plastic and metal, cheap, human, stupidly small for something that could decide whether 3 men lived or died. Jonas leaned closer to the hatch seam, face calm, almost curious. And in the tiny reflection of the hatch's polished metal ring, I saw his face twice, one where it should be, and one half a beat behind, smiling like it already knew what I was about to do. My fingers hovered over that comms cutoff, like it was a trigger. The stupid part is, I didn't feel brave. I felt cornered, like the ocean had finally found a way to put its hand on the inside of the ship and squeeze. In SAT control, everything is built to keep you from acting on impulse. Two-step confirmations, lockout keys, procedures taped to every panel. You don't just do something. You log it, call it out, get another operator to witness it. But it was 2:14 in the middle of nowhere, and the only witness I had was Vince, who was already deciding this was my problem, not his. On the monitor, Jonas put his palm back on the hatch wheel. He didn't crank it. He didn't test it like a diver messing around. He held it like someone greeting an old friend. Cal shifted in his bunk, eyes half open. Reese rolled and muttered a sleepy curse. Jonas didn't move. He didn't blink much either. His chest rose and fell in that same stupid rhythm I'd started to hate. Too quick. Pause. One long. The ping at my headset again, even though I'd pulled it halfway off one ear. The sound didn't care about my little human tricks. It found me anyway. I keyed the chamber intercom, forcing my voice into something normal. Jonas. Hands off the hatch. He turned his head, slow, like he was choosing how to look at me. He leaned toward the mic. We're fine, he said again. That "we" landed hard. It made the hair at the back of my neck lift. It wasn't the word itself. It was how clean it sounded. No helium-escape. No distortion. The chamber audio should have been helium light, high pitch, cartoonish. That's saturation. That's physics. That's a guarantee. Jonas's voice came through like he was standing behind me. I snapped my eyes to the gas readouts. Helium mix was correct. Chamber pressure stable. Scrubbers running. Nothing on my panel said physics just took a smoke break. Vince was behind me, arms crossed. I could feel his stare like heat. That's the comms processor, he said. It's doing some auto-correction thing, where you've got a bad filter. We don't have auto-correction, I said. He shrugged. Then it's a bad filter. In the chamber, Cal sat up, fully awake now. He stared at Jonas's bare feet on the grating, then at the hatch wheel under Jonas's hand. Cal didn't yell. Cal didn't panic. He just did what old divers do when something feels wrong. He got angry. Get your hand off the wheel, Cal said, high helium voice, sharp as a knife. Jonas didn't even look at him. Cal swung his legs out of the bunk and stood. He moved slow, careful, because in saturation, everything feels heavier and you don't waste energy. He stepped toward Jonas and reached for his shoulder. Jonas shifted his weight a half step without looking, and Cal's hand missed by an inch. It wasn't a dodge like a fight. It was like Jonas already knew where Cal's hand would go and moved before Cal decided. Cal froze, hand hovering in the air. Reese sat up, rubbing his face. What's going on? Jonas finally looked at them, and his smile showed up again. Quick, small, like a reflex. Go back to sleep, Jonas said. Same thing, clear voice. No ilium. Reese stared at Cal like he wanted confirmation he wasn't going crazy. Cal's jaw worked. He looked at the internal camera for a second, like he knew I was watching, and then he did something I didn't expect. He spit, just a fat glob, straight onto Jonas's bare foot. It's a diver thing. It's not classy. It's an old habit. You spit on something and watch how it behaves. Spit spreads weird when there's oil. Spit beads when there's chemicals. Spit tells you if a surface is wrong. The spit hit Jonas's skin, and it didn't slide. It clung like Jonas's foot was dry. In a saturation chamber, nothing is dry. You sweat, the air sweats, the walls sweat. Moisture creeps into everything. Skin stays damp. Spit should smear. It sat there like Jonas was wearing a glove of something I couldn't see. Cal's face changed. Not fear, not surprise. Recognition, like he'd seen a specific kind of wrong before and hated it. He reached behind him and grabbed the emergency toolkit, yanked it open, pulled the small, cheap plastic oxygen analyzer probe out like it was a weapon. He shoved it toward Jonas's face. Breathe on it. Jonas didn't move. Cal pressed it closer. Now, Jonas inhaled, exhaled once over the sensor. On my panel, Jonas's respiration curve stayed perfect. Heart rate stayed perfect. Cal stared at the probe's tiny screen. Then he flinched and threw it like it burned him. It clattered off the chamber wall and bounced under the bunk. Reese sat up straighter. What did it say? Cal swallowed hard. It said nothing. No reading. Like he didn't breathe. Jonas's smile widened a fraction. I didn't wait for Vince anymore. I flipped the internal comms isolation, cutting their chamber mics from my audio feed. I left the vitals running, left the video running, but killed the voice path. I didn't want Jonas's clean voice in my ear. I didn't want whatever else was piggybacking on it. Vince grabbed my shoulder. What the hell are you doing? Shutting him up, I said. You can't isolate them. That's a safety violation. Safety violation is letting whatever that is talked through my system. I snapped. He leaned down close enough that I smelled his coffee breath. You're gonna get people killed. You cut comms. They panic, they do something stupid. They're already doing something stupid, I said, pointing at the monitor. Jonas's hand tightened on the hatch wheel again. Cal stepped between Jonas and the hatch, planting his feet wide on the grating like a bouncer. He grabbed Jonas's wrist. Jonas finally reacted. He didn't punch Cal. He didn't wrestle. He just turned his wrist, smooth, and Cal's grip slid off like Cal's hand suddenly had no friction. Cal stumbled one step, caught himself, and stared at his own palm like it betrayed him. Reese scrambled out of his bunk and grabbed Jonas from behind, arms around Jonas's chest. Jonas stood still. Reese strained. His face went red. His veins popped. Jonas didn't budge. It looked like Reese was hugging a steel post. Then Jonas leaned forward a tiny bit, and Reese's arms slipped off his chest, sliding down Jonas's ribs like Jonas's whole body had turned slick. Reese fell backward onto his ass hard and swore. Cal's anger cracked into fear for a second, and he covered it immediately with more anger. He swung the wrench he'd used earlier, not at Jonas's head, but at Jonas's hand on the hatch wheel. Metal hit bone. The sound came through even with audio isolated. A dull crack you can feel through video. Jonas didn't flinch. Cal hit again. Jonas turned his head and looked at Cal like Cal was a bug. Then Jonas lifted his hand off the wheel and held it up, palm open, showing Cal the glove slid on the old cut. The skin beneath it looked wrong. Pale. Smooth. Like scar tissue that never had pores. Cal Froja. Reese stared wide-eyed. Jonas lowered his hand and stepped back from the hatch. It wasn't surrender. It felt like a pause. Like whatever one of the hatch decided it didn't need a rush. Vince let out a breath like he'd been holding it. See? It stopped. You made it worse, but stopped. It stopped because it can wait, I said. Vince shook his head hard, like shaking could dislodge what he'd seen. You're spiraling. I didn't argue. I opened the SAT incident log and started typing with shaking fingers. Timestamps, observations, audio anomalies, physical behavior, comms distortion, anything I could write down that wouldn't sound like Mirror Monster to a corporate investigator. Because offshore work has a second layer of reality, paperwork. If something kills you, paperwork will still try to explain it as human error, not the ocean taking a bite. I typed until my fingers cramped. Then the deck radio squawked. "SAT control, this is deck. We got a problem with the bell." My heart jumped. Define problem. Umbilical reels, twitching, like it's under tension, but the bell's in cradle. Nobody's touching it. I turned to the bell system monitor. The bell umbilical was connected, routed, secured. Tension sensor read 0. Then it blipped, just a tiny spike, like someone below deck tugged it. Impossible. The bell was on deck. The umbilical is a thick, armored bundle. It doesn't twitch unless something pulls it. The ping hit my headset again, even though comms were isolated. Too quick. Pause. One long. I stood and walked out of SAT control into the cold night air on deck. The ship lights painted everything harsh and pale. The ocean around us was black with white teeth of foam. Wind cut under my jacket. The deck smelled like salt and hydraulic oil. The bell sat in its cradle, slick with seawater. The umbilical fed into it through a sealed gland, thick as my forearm. The reel was bolted down, locked. And yet I saw it. A slow, subtle movement. The umbilical shifted a half inch like it was breathing. The deck guys stood around it in a loose circle, not wanting to get close. Big men who've seen cranes drop loads and wires snap and kill people. They didn't like unpredictable tension. One of them, Miller, pointed. It did that twice, like a fish biting a line. I crouched near the reel, put my gloved hand near the cable without touching. The umbilical's outer jacket had that wet, matte sheen. Water dripped off it. Then the surface of the jacket rippled. Not a full wave. A localized shiver, like something moved under the rubber. I jerked back hard enough to land on my ass. Miller swore. "That's not right. Nosleep." Vince stepped out behind me, face tight. He'd followed, pretending he wasn't scared. Its pressure equalizing. Temperature change. Rubber flex. The umbilical jacket rippled again, closer to the bell gland, like something traveled toward the bell. My brain flashed that one frame from the ROV feed, the other dark on the other side of the mirror. The tiny points of light moving like they had rules. Something had found our line. Something had found our path. He stood fast. Disconnect the bell. Vinches nept. No, we don't disconnect without procedure. Disconnect the bell. I repeated, louder, and the deck guys heard the tone and started moving. They didn't need my authority. They needed permission to act like what they were seeing mattered. Miller grabbed the disconnect tools. Another guy went for the lockout key. Hand moved quick. Boots clanged on steel. Vince grabbed my arm. "You're going to shut down the whole operation over a twitch." I leaned into him and spoke low. "If that cable is a path, and that thing down there is a door, then we just brought the door's handle onto our deck." His eyes flicked to the bell. He swallowed. For the first time, his boss mask cracked. Just do it clean," he muttered. We started the disconnect. You don't just yank. You depressurize lines, cap ports, secure seals. The bell's life support connections get capped. The comms get isolated. The hot water supply gets shut. Everything gets buttoned down. Miller got his wrench on the gland bolts. As he turned the first one, the bell's outer shell rang once. A single dull knock from inside. Not metal settling. Not wind. A knock. Then another. Too quick. Pause. One long. Miller's face went pale under deck lights. Nope. He backed away like the bell was about to bite him. Vince swore under his breath. He stepped forward, put a hand on the bell shell, like he could prove to himself it was just metal. He kept his hand there, his eyes unfocused for a second, like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. Then his fingers started to flex against the shell in the same rhythm as the ping. Too quick. Pause. One long. I grabbed his wrist and yanked his hand off the bell. Hard. Vince jerked like I'd slapped him. He stared at his own fingers, then at me. His face flushed with anger to cover what just happened. "Don't touch it," I said. He tried to speak, then stopped, like his tongue didn't want to cooperate. Miller's crew finished the disconnect without touching the bell again. They worked fast. They didn't joke. They didn't talk. They just did what you do when you're trying not to think. We capped the umbilical. We locked the reel. We put a physical barrier around the bell like that would matter. The bell knocked again, once like it was disappointed. I went back into SAT control and slammed the container door shut behind me. The air inside felt warmer, wrong, like I'd walked into a waiting room. On the chamber cam, Cal and Reese had pinned Jonas against the wall. Not with ropes. They couldn't. Ropes slip. They used their bodies. Cal braced one shoulder into Jonas's chest and pushed. Reese held Jonas's wrists. Jonas didn't struggle. He didn't strain. He just watched them like a teacher watching kids solve the wrong problem. I typed a quick message into the SAT system log. Possible contamination event. Bell disconnected. Internal comms isolated. Then I did something that I knew would cost me my job if we lived. I initiated emergency SAT lockdown. That means you lock every hatch, disable manual overrides, require dual key release for any opening between compartments. It turns the SAT system into a prison. It's there for fire, flooding, toxic gas. I hit the sequence. A red light blinked on my panel. Another. Then steady. Vince saw it and exploded. "What did you just do?" "Locked it," I said. "You can't lock a chamber with men inside. That's kidnapping. It's keeping something from getting out," I said. He stepped toward me like he wanted to hit me. His fist clenched. Then the ping hit the room again, not through headset, through the steel itself. Too quick. Pause. One long. Vince's fist loosened. His eyes flicked to the chamber monitors. His anger hesitated, like it didn't know where to go. "Call the company," he said finally. Voice low. "Who?" I said. "Some desk guy who's asleep? A manager who'll tell us to keep working until we die." "Call them," he repeated, because he needed someone above him to tell him what he was seeing wasn't real. I did. I called the onshore superintendent. I woke him up. I tried to describe it without sounding insane. He asked if anyone was injured. I said no. He asked if the cable was repaired. I said no. He asked if operations could continue. I said no. There was a pause. Then he said flat, "If you can't support that with a mechanical failure report, you're going to be held liable for downtime." I stared at the phone like it was a joke. "There's something in the SAT system." He exhaled, annoyed. "Are you under the influence? Have you taken anything?" "Ask the divers," I said. He said he'd review the incident after daylight. After daylight, like the ocean waited for office hours. I hung up. Vince laughed once, sharp and humorless. "You just killed your career. Better than killing them," I said, and even as I said it, I wasn't sure. Because the worst part was, I didn't know if my lockdown helped. I didn't know if the thing needed a hatch to open. I didn't know if it already moved through steel the way it pressed that thumbprint into the chamber wall. I only knew I was watching Jonas stand there too calm, too clean, while the ocean knocked politely at our door. Around 3 o'clock, the chamber humidity spiked. Not gradually. It jumped like someone dumped a bucket of warm water inside a sealed tube. Kalza skin shona. Reese wiped his face and stared at his wet palm like he'd never sweated before. Jonas didn't sweat. He stood in the middle of the chamber, wrists still held, and then he did something small that changed everything. He inhaled, and I heard it through the video feed, even with audio cut, because it wasn't sound. It was movement, a subtle pulsing in the chamber's overhead condensate line, the clear hose that drains moisture from the system. The hose bulged. A clear line of water moved through it, traveling against gravity toward the chamber. The water shouldn't move that way. The water moved anyway. It reached the drip trap at the top of the chamber. The trap is supposed to prevent backflow. It's a one-way barrier. The water pushed through like it didn't recognize the concept of one-way. A bead formed at the trap's outlet inside the chamber. Then another. They didn't fall. They hung, held by surface tension that looked too strong. Then they stretched into a thin filament and reached down toward Jonas like a hand reaching for a child. Reese let go of Jonas's wrist and backed up fast, eyes wide. Cal didn't move. He stared at the filament, jaws set, like he was about to fight water itself. Jonas lifted his chin, almost inviting it. The filament touched Jonas's shoulder. Jonas closed his eyes for a second, and his face relaxed like someone sinking into a bath. The filament thickened. More water pushed through. It wasn't pouring. It was forming. It shaped itself into a ribbon, then into something like fingers, thin and quick, wrapping around Jonas's arm. Cal grabbed the emergency knife from the toolkit and slashed at it. The blade cut through the water hand. The cut didn't spray. It didn't splatter. The water split cleanly and then sealed back together immediately, like you can't cut a rope if the rope is made of itself. Cal slashed again, harder. The water hand tightened around Jonas's arm like it was annoyed. Jonas opened his eyes and looked at Cal. Cal froze mid-swing. I watched Cal's respiration curve spike for the first time since this started. His heart rate jumped. Then Cal lowered the knife slowly, like he couldn't remember why he picked it up. Reese stared at Cal, then at Jonas. Jonas smiled again. Not small this time, wider. On my panel, Jonas's respiration curve finally changed. It matched Cal's. Exactly. Same rate, same depth, same timing. Like Jonas had copied him. Or like Cal's breathing wasn't his anymore. I slammed my hand on the console hard enough to hurt. No. Vince stood behind me, silent now. His face looked gray. You see it now, I said, not even meaning to address him. It doesn't need the door. It's using our systems. It's using our lines. He whispered, barely audible. What is it? I didn't have a name. Names make things feel controllable. This didn't feel controllable. I only had one thought that kept looping. Path. We'd given it paths. Umbilical. Comms. Condensate line. Steel walls that flexed under pressure. We'd built a neat little network of ways in and out. And it was patient. At 317, the first real mechanical failure hit. The CO2 scrubber differential pressure alarm tripped. That should never trip fast. Scrubbers clog slowly. Media degrades over hours. Filters load gradually. This alarm jumped like someone stuffed a rag in the airflow. I stared at the DP reading climbing in real time. Then stepped forward, voice tense. Scrubbers failing. No, I said, because part of me still believed in rules. Scrubber can't fail like that. But the graph didn't care about my belief. DP climbed. CO2 in the chamber started rising, slow at first, then faster. That means the air in the chamber is getting heavier with what they breathe out. That means headaches, confusion, panic, unconsciousness, death. Emergency procedure is simple. Bypass scrubber, switch to backup, increase flow, start contingency oxygen, monitor for hypercapnia. I started the bypass. The bypass valve indicator turned green, but the DP kept climbing, like the bypass line was clogged too. Vince cursed and grabbed the manual override lever. I'm going to crack the hatch and... No. I barked sharp. Do not open anything. If we don't, they suffocate. If you open, whatever that is walks out. He stared at me like he wanted to argue. Then he looked at the chamber cam. Cal had gone slack against the wall. He wasn't unconscious, but his eyes looked unfocused. Reese sat on the bunk with his head in his hands, breathing hard. Hypercapnia makes you feel like you're drowning in air. It makes you panic because your body screams for relief and nothing gives it. Jonas stood in the center of the chamber with water hands wrapped around his arm like jewelry, calm as ever. CO2 climbed. I switched to scrubber backup. DP climbed. I increased flow. DP climbed. It was like something was blocking every path we had for air to leave and return clean. Then I saw it, the condensate line again. The water wasn't just forming hands. It had moved deeper into the system. It had pushed into the scrubber moisture traps, into the drains, into the little places where water sits and you forget exists. It had invaded every low point, and it was thickening, not like freezing, like gelling, like it was turning our life's support into its own body. Vince's voice cracked. We have to open the hatch. I forced my hands to stop shaking. If we open the hatch and it gets out, it won't just be them. It'll be the whole ship. Then sure. Then whatever it wants. You don't know that, he snapped, but he didn't sound sure. No, I said, I don't, but I know it's already learning. I know it already talked without helium. I know it already pressed through steel. I know it already used our water. I looked at the emergency gas bottles charted on the wall. There's always a last resort, blow down and flush. It's brutal. It's not clean, but you can slam fresh gas through the chamber and vent to dump contaminants. Except we can't vent to atmosphere normally at sat pressure. You don't vent hundreds of psi into a ship. You can injure people. You can damage equipment. You can blow fittings. But there's an emergency blow-off line. It routes to a reinforced vent stack with blast shields. It exists for fires and pressure anomalies. It's loud, violent, ugly. I grabbed the emergency blow-off handle cover and flipped it open. It's grabbed my wrist. If you vent, you risk decompression injury. Not if I keep pressure, I said. I'm not dumping pressure. I'm flushing gas. You can't flush fast at sat pressure without turbulence. Watch me, I said, and my voice sounded like someone else's. Like I'd stepped out of myself and left only the part that acts. I called deck crew on radio and told them to clear the vent zone. My words came out steady because my body had stopped feeling like mine. They cleared. They didn't ask questions. They heard my tone. I opened the blow-off line a crack. The vent stack screamed outside, a high, angry howl. Inside, on my panel, chamber pressure dipped slightly and stabilized as the regulators compensated. Fresh gas surged in. CO2 spiked briefly, turbulence pushing it into the sensors, then dropped. Not fast, but it dropped. Cal lifted his head a little, eyes clearing. Reese coughed and wiped his face, still panicked but alive. Jonas didn't change. The water hands tightened around his arm. They moved with the gas turbulence like streamers in a storm. They didn't break apart. They adapted. Then Jonas did something that made my blood go cold. He walked to the chamber wall again and pressed his palm to it. The steel dimpled. And this time, the dimple didn't feel like a thumbprint. It felt like the wall was softening. The curve of the chamber shifted inward in a wider area, like a fist pressing from the other side. The vent stack screamed. The ping rhythm beat through it, buried in the howl. Too quick. Pause. One long. Vince backed away from the monitor, face pale. It's trying to come through. I kept venting. I shoved fresh gas in. I did everything by instinct and training and pure stubbornness. Jonas lifted his palm. The wall held its dent for a second, then slowly eased back. But I saw something left behind on the steel. A wet sheen, like condensation, except it formed a faint, branching pattern, like fingerprints made of water that didn't evaporate. The pattern crawled, slowly, toward the hatch seam. Vince's voice went small. It's spreading. I locked my jaw and forced myself to think like a tech, not a scared animal. Paths. It needed paths. If it could move through our life support water, then the only way to stop it was to remove the water, remove the lines, remove the easy routes. You can't remove all water. Humans make water. Machines may condensate. The sea air outside is water. But you can isolate. You can flood the system with dryness. We had desiccant units for electronics cabinets. Not enough for a chamber. But we had one other thing. Helium. Helium is dry as hell. It strips moisture from everything. It dries your throat, your sinuses, your skin. It makes people cough. It makes you bleed from the nose sometimes. It's brutal, but it's dry. We were already in heliox, but the mix wasn't at max dryness. We could crank it. We could run the gas heaters differently. We could change the dew point. I started pushing the system toward a drier profile. Upped heater temps, changed the scrubber recirculation, rerouted through the driest loop we had. Cal's breathing sounded rough on the graphs. Reese's too. They'd feel in their throats. They'd hate it. Jonas's respiration stayed perfect. The wet sheen pattern on the chamber wall slowed. The branching marks stopped crawling and just sat there, glossy. The water hands on Jonas's arm thinned slightly, like they didn't like the dryness. Jonas looked down at them. His smile faded for the first time. Good. Vince stared at the panel changes. What are you doing? Drying it out, I said. He blinked, like the concept of fighting something with humidity was absurd. Then he nodded once, reluctantly. The CO2 stayed manageable. The pressure stayed stable. The chamber wasn't killing them right now, but it wasn't over, because Jonas wasn't the only problem anymore. The ping started showing up on other channels. It hit Reese's respiration trace. Tiny hitch. 2 quick breaths, pause, 1 long. Then Cal's. It wasn't full control. Not yet. It was like a metronome trying to teach them. And the worst part? My own breathing started matching it when I wasn't paying attention. I caught myself doing it once. Sitting there, exhausted, staring at the monitor, and my chest moved in that stupid rhythm. 2 quick. Pause. 1 long. I jerked a breath in and forced myself into a different pattern, like I was fighting a song stuck in my head. Vince rubbed his face hard. We need to get them out. We need to abort Saturday. Abort how? I snapped. You can't just pop a hatch. You decompress for days. You can't rush it. We can emergency decompress, he said, and I heard desperation in his voice. We can blow them down. Emergency decompression kills people. Not always, but often enough that you don't suggest it unless you're choosing between certain death and probable death. You blow them down, they embolize, I said. They seize. They bleed. They die. If we don't, that thing. He stopped because he didn't want to say it like it was real. I looked at Jonas on the monitor, standing too calm, the water film on his skin duller now, but still there. Cal and Reese sat on opposite sides of the chamber, watching him like he was a bomb. We do a controlled decompress, I said, as fast as safety allows. We keep it dry. We keep it isolated. We ride it out. Vince laughed, bitter. Ride it out, like it's weather. It is weather, I said. Just inside, I started the emergency but controlled schedule. Not a normal, long, slow one. A compressed one. Still hours and hours, but faster than company would ever approve. I didn't care about approval now. I cared about minutes. At 4:05, Jonah spoke again, even with comms isolated. Not through the mic, through the speaker. My speaker, the one in SAT control that should only play what I route through it. It clicked once, then Jonas's voice filled the room, low and clear. Don't. Vince froze. I froze. Every muscle in my body locked. My hand slammed the speaker power switch. The speaker went dead. Jonas's voice continued, softer now, like it came through the steel. Don't close it. I stared at the SAT container walls. I stared at the seam where the panel met the frame. I felt suddenly like the whole room was a chamber too, and I was the one inside. Vince whispered, "It's in the ship." I didn't answer because my brain was doing that thing where it tries to pick a reality that hurts less. I wanted it to be interference. I wanted it to be stress. But I just heard a man at SAT pressure talk through dead speakers. The vent stack outside gave a brief shudder as wind changed. For a second, the howl altered, and inside it, I heard the knock rhythm again. 2 quick. Pause. 1 long. At 5:20, the ship's freshwater system alarmed. Low pressure. Pump cycling weird. One of the engineers came on radio, voice tight. We're getting air in the line. And something else. Water looks cloudy. Cloudy water on a ship is usually rust, sediment, air. It's a maintenance issue. But my gut twisted because of the condensate filament forming hands. Shut freshwater isolation valves, I told him. He snapped back. That cuts showers, galley. Shut them, I said, and the engineer heard my tone and didn't argue. Vince stared at me. You think it's in the water now? I think it knows water is a path, I said, and we're sitting on an ocean. The sun didn't rise like a relief. It rose like an indifferent light, showing you the mess. By 8 o'clock, the divers were still in saturation, still alive, still trapped with Jonas. The decompression schedule crawled forward. Every hour that passed felt like a coin flip. Cal stayed stillborn. He kept moving. He kept forcing his body to do human things. Eat, drink, talk to Reese, curse at Jonas. He kept reminding himself he existed. Reese started to fray. Hypercapnia, fear lingered in him. He jumped at small sounds. He rubbed his face until it went red. He kept watching Jonas's chest like he expected it to stop moving entirely. Jonas stayed calm. Too calm. Sometimes he'd sit with his back to the wall and stare at nothing for long stretches. Sometimes he'd stand and press his palm to steel and leave another wet fingerprint pattern. Each time I cranked dryness, the pattern slowed. Each time my attention drifted, they sped up. It felt personal, like it wanted me tired. Vince went through phases. Denial, anger, bargaining. He tried calling onshore again. He tried getting me to restore normal calms. He tried saying we should just keep diving, finish the cable, and then decompress like planned. Money, I said once, exhausted, and the word came out like spit. You still thinking money matters? He glared at me and then didn't answer. Because at some point, even Vince learned money doesn't buy you out of a steel tube. At 11:40, Cal collapsed. Not dramatic, not a seizure. He just stood up from the bunk, took 2 steps, and then his knees folded. Reese caught him, yelling his name, shaking him. On my vitals panel, Cal's heart rate dipped, then spiked. His respiration trace went ragged. CO2 in his blood likely high. Dehydration, stress, fear, dry heliox ripping moisture from him. And something else, because when Cal gasped, the pattern snapped into place. Too quick. Pause. One long. Cal's breathing synced perfectly with Jonas's. Reese looked up at Jonas, panic in his eyes, and for the first time, Jonas moved toward them with urgency. Not to help, to claim. Jonas knelt by Cal, put 2 fingers to Cal's throat like he was checking a pulse, then slid those fingers up to Cal's jawline. Cal's mouth opened, gasping. Jonas leaned close, and I saw Jonas's lips move. No sound, but the motion was clear, a counting rhythm. Too quick. Pause. One long. Cal's eyes rolled, then snapped open wide, staring at the chamber's ceiling like something had hooked behind them. Reese backed away, scrambling, almost tripping over the bunk. I slammed the chamber emergency floodlights on. Bright white inside the chamber, harsh, washing out shadows. Sometimes light breaks trance. Sometimes it forces the brain back into the body. Cal blinked hard, his eyes focused. He coughed, spit thick, then spat again, furious. He pushed himself up on one elbow and looked at Jonas with raw hatred. Jonas stood, smooth and calm again. Cal's helium-squeaked voice rasped through the chamber mic. Only it didn't reach me because comms were cut. I still saw his mouth, saw the shape of the words. I didn't need audio to read them. You're not him. Jonas tilted his head. Cal reached under the bunk and pulled the smashed oxygen analyzer probe back out. He jabbed it toward Jonas's mouth again, shaking. Jonas opened his mouth, and for a split second on the video feed, his teeth looked too perfect, too dry, like they belonged in a different environment. The probe screen flashed, then went blank. Cal threw it again, but this time he also threw himself forward, lunging at Jonas with both hands like he meant to choke him. Reese shouted and tried to pull Cal back. Jonas caught Cal's wrists like catching falling objects. Easy. Cal strainat. His shoulders shook. Jonas leaned in close and pressed his forehead against Cal's. Not violent, almost intimate. Cal went still. His eyes softened. Then he smiled. A small, quick smile. The same one Jonas had been doing. Reese made a sound that looked like a sob. I felt something inside me crack. Not fear. Something worse. The moment you realize your tools don't work. The moment you realize a man's stubbornness can be stolen. On my panel, Cal's vitals stabilized unnaturally fast. Heart rate smoothed. Respiration smoothed. The ragged panic vanished like someone flipped a switch. Cal sat back on his heels, calm now, and looked at Reese like Reese was the one acting weird. Reese backed into the far corner, shaking his head, hands up like he was facing a wild animal. I grabbed Vince's arm hard enough to hurt. We're losing them. Vince stared at the monitor, mouth open slightly. Cal's fine. Fine isn't the goal, I said. Fine is what it looks like when it wins. He swallowed. His eyes were wet. I'd never seen that on him. What do we do? I stared at my panel, at the lockdown lights, at the vent controls, at the emergency systems. I ran through options like a man flipping through knives to see which one hurts less. You can't shoot something in a SAT chamber. You can't open hatches. You can't flood it. Flooding would be handing it its favorite element. But you could do one thing. You could take away its path to you. The comms were already isolated. The bell was disconnected. We'd shut fresh water. We'd dried the chamber as much as possible. One path remained that I hadn't fully acknowledged because it was the worst one. The transfer trunk, the sealed passage that connects the chamber stack to the bell. It's steel, short, and it's the closest thing on the ship to a doorway. Even disconnected, it exists. And if that mirror thing wasn't just a plate on the seabed, but some kind of interface, some kind of aperture, then it might not care about our simple physical disconnections. It might be anchored to the concept of transfer. I walked out of SAT control and down the narrow metal steps to the SAT stack area. The ship groaned around me. The air smelled damp, metallic, alive with compressor heat. The SAT stack stood there like a giant pipe organ of steel cylinders. Hatches bolted shut, gauges glowing, lines running like veins. The transfer trunk hatch sat at the bottom, a round door with a wheel. There was condensation on it, but the condensation didn't bead randomly. It formed faint arcs, curves that mirrored the shape of a handprint. I didn't touch it. I leaned close and listened. I heard the knock, not through speakers, through steel. Too quick. Pause. One long. I backed away until my shoulders hit the bulkhead. My skin crawled. Vince appeared behind me, quieter now, like the ship itself had taught him how to whisper. What are you thinking? I stared at that hatch like it was a mouth. I'm thinking it wants to transfer, I said. Vince shook his head slowly. We've locked everything. Lock stop people, I said. Not this. He swallowed hard. Then what? I looked at the emergency flooding system for the transfer trunk. Yes, flooding. A water deluge meant for fire suppression, meant to cool and control heat in a confined steel space. It was seawater fed. The idea of opening seawater into any part of this system made me sick. But the deluge lines had one feature the other water paths didn't. They were one-way, high pressure, and they ended in drains that routed straight to overboard with no recirculation. A blast through, then out. Not a circulation path. A purge. I ran my hand over the control box cover without opening it. If it's using water lines to move, maybe we use water to push it out. Not feed it. Push. Vince stared at me like I'd suggested lighting the ship on fire to kill a spider. That's insane. Everything about this is insane, I said. Pick a flavor. He didn't answer. He just looked back at the hatch, at the condensation handprint that wasn't a handprint, and I watched him decide that sanity wasn't on the menu anymore. We went back to SAT control. On the chamber cam, Cal sat beside Jonas now. Not pinned, not fighting, sitting like friends. Reese sat alone in the corner, knees to chest, rocking slightly. Jonas turned his head and looked into the camera again. I felt that gaze like a finger on my spine. Then, slowly, Jonas raised his hand and tapped the chamber wall. 2 taps. Pause. 1 tap. The ping. 2 quick. Pause. 1 long. And the steel answered back, not as a dent this time, but as a faint, spreading wetness that crawled out from under the wall insulation. Seemed like the chamber itself was sweating from the inside out. I didn't wait. I keyed the deluge purge on the transfer trunk. Vince flinched. Do it fast. I slammed the purge. A deep thump ran through the ship like a heartbeat. Then another. The deluge system roared as seawater surged into the transfer trunk, blasting through spray nozzles. On my monitor, a secondary cam in the trunk, meant for inspection, flickered to life automatically. The view showed a short steel tunnel, empty and wet. Then the water hit. It didn't just splash. It sheeted, violent, loud, smashing into every surface and draining hard. And in the middle of it, God, I still see it when I close my eyes, something moved against the flow. Not a fish, not debris, a pale shape clinging to the steel like a hand clinging to a railing. Too many fingers. The fingers slid along the wall, searching, trying to find a seam, trying to find purchase, fighting the water like it hated being pushed. The deluge hammered it. The shape peeled, stretched, then snapped back, refusing to let go. Then it did something that made my stomach twist. It turned, not like a whole body turning, like a surface turning to face the camera. And for a second, in that wet chaos, I saw something like a face. Not human, not animal, just a suggestion of features formed by water and film and shadow. And the teeth. Those same bright, dry human teeth, grinning where they shouldn't exist. The water forced it down. It slid toward the drain grate at the bottom of the trunk. It hit the grate, fingers grabbing bars. It tried to hold. The deluge didn't stop. Finally, the fingers slipped through, not by squeezing like flesh, by thinning like liquid, like it didn't have bones. It poured through the grate and vanished into the drain line that shot it out into the ocean. The trunk camera feed steadied. Water drained. The tunnel sat empty, dripping. The knocking stopped. For the first time in hours, the ship felt quiet. I didn't celebrate. I didn't breathe easy. I just sat there, shaking, waiting for the next thing. On the chamber cam, Jonas's smile faltered. His eyes narrowed like he felt something leave. Cal blinked hard and looked around like he'd woken up from a nap. His face twisted with confusion, then horror as he noticed where he was sitting, beside Jonas, like he couldn't remember choosing that. Reese lifted his head, eyes wet, watching Cal like he wanted to believe. Jonas stood up slowly. He looked at his own hands like he expected to see something there. The water sheen on his skin dulled further, cracking at the edges like drying glue. Then Jonas looked into the camera again. And this time, I didn't feel watched. I felt hated. He walked to the chamber wall, pressed his palm to it. The steel didn't dent. The wet pattern didn't spread. He pressed harder. Nothing. Jonas inhaled, and for the first time his respiration curve spiked, an ugly hitch like pain. Good. Cal staggered to his feet, shaking. He backed away from Jonas like he was backing away from cliff edge. Reese crawled forward, grabbed Cal's ankle, like he needed contact with something real. Cal nodded once tight. Jonas stood still in the center of the chamber, chest rising and falling, uneven now. Then he spoke. This time his voice came through the chamber, like the normal way. High, helium thin, distorted. It sounded like a diver again. Open it, he squeaked, and the words sounded wrong, coming from the right physics. Cal shouted something back, mouth wide, face furious. Jonas's eyes flicked to the hatch wheel, then to the camera. Then, slowly, he sat down on the grating, like a man who realized the door didn't work anymore. The decompression schedule crawled. Hour by hour, pressure stepped down. Cal and Reese stayed away from Jonas. They slept in shifts. They ate barely. They kept their eyes on him like you keep your eyes on a shark you can't outrun. Jonas didn't press the wall anymore. He didn't smile anymore. He just sat and watched, breathing uneven, sometimes clutching his own forearm like something inside it itched. Every time we dropped pressure, his vitals glitched. Not machine glitch, body glitch. Heart rate stutter. Respiration pattern misfire. Like whatever held him didn't like letting go. The wet sheen on his skin cracked more with each step. It peeled at the edges like a film drying. At 18:30, as we hit a major pressure transition, Jonas convulsed. Not a seizure exactly, more like his body tried to reject itself. He curled on the grating, fingers digging into his forearm, nails ripping skin. Blood showed finally. Real blood, darker than I expected, thick in the chamber light. Cal flinched at the sight like it proved Jonas was human again. Jonas gagged, and something came out of his mouth. Not vomit. A thin, translucent strip, like a membrane ribbon, sliding out between his teeth. It wriggled. Cal moved before thinking. He grabbed the strip with a gloved hand and yanked. The membrane stretched like taffy, resisting, then snapped free with a wet pop. Jonas choked and sucked air in, helium voice squealing. The strip flopped in Cal's hand like a slug without a body. Cal slammed it onto the grating and stomped it until it stopped moving. Jonas lay there, shaking, then went still. His respiration curved smooth, but this time it looked human. Messy. Real. Reese leaned close, eyes wide, and touched Jonas's shoulder carefully. Jonas blinked up at him, confused, tears leaking from the corners of his eyes like he didn't understand why he was crying. He mouthed something, helium squeaked, too soft for me to hear through the cut audio. Reese leaned closer. Jonas whispered, and even though I couldn't hear the exact words, I saw Reese's face change into something like grief. Reese looked up at the camera and shook his head hard, like he was telling me, "Don't ask. Don't make me say it." We kept decompressing. We didn't stop. We didn't slow. We pushed as hard as safety allowed, because now we all understood the same thing without saying it. Whatever it was, it didn't like the pressure change. It didn't like losing the environment it had found. Pressure was its grip. Time was its patience. Dryness was its irritation. And flushing it out of the transfer trunk had hurt it. When we finally brought them to surface pressure, it took almost 2 days. 2 days of living inside that control room, eyes gritty, head pounding, jumping at every pump sound, every creak of steel. When the last hatch opened in Cal and Reese crawled out, they looked like corpses. Skin pale, lips cracked, eyes bloodshot. Jonas came out last. He walked on his own, but his posture looked wrong, like he was afraid of his own joints. Medical met them. Blankets, oxygen, vitals, questions. Cal shoved past everyone and grabbed me by the front of my coveralls. His hands shook so hard he couldn't keep a grip. He leaned close, helium still fading out of his voice, but low enough to sound like a human again. And he said, "Don't listen to the knocks." I stared at him. "What?" He squeezed harder. "Don't answer. Don't breathe it. It teaches you." Reese stood behind him, eyes hollow. He nodded once, slow. Jonas sat on a bench, wrapped in a blanket, staring at his hands. He flexed his fingers like he didn't trust them. Then he looked up at me. And for a second, just a second, I saw the old calm in his eyes. Not the unnatural calm, the human kind. The kind you get when you've been through hell and you're too tired to pretend it didn't change you. He opened his mouth like he wanted to speak. Then he shut it again, like he didn't trust his own words. We turned the ship around and ran for shore like our hair was on fire. On shore, the company descended like vultures. Investigators, safety guys, lawyers. They wanted logs. They wanted root cause. They wanted to hear electrical interference and equipment malfunction and crew fatigue. They didn't want to hear door on the seabed and water hands and a man whose voice wasn't helium. Let's try to play it both ways. He told them the scrubber malfunctioned. The job was aborted for safety. The bell had a comms glitch. He avoided the rest like it was contagious. I didn't. I handed them my incident log. Every timestamp, every anomaly, every reading. The investigator skimmed it, then looked at me like I'd written a diary entry about aliens. He asked if I'd slept. I said no. He asked if I'd taken anything. I said no. He asked if I understood the financial impact of a false report. I said, "Do you understand the medical impact of whatever happened down there?" He didn't answer. They suspended me pending review. They put Vince on another vessel 2 weeks later like nothing happened. They sent Cal home early and quietly. He disappeared off the roster. Reese quit, just walked away, didn't answer calls. Jonas stayed. That's the part that still makes me feel sick. Jonas stayed with the company. He did rehab. He passed fit to work. He got cleared. He avoided me completely. And the company went back out there with another vessel and another crew. Different faces. Same contract. Same ocean. I know because I checked the marine traffic logs obsessively like a lunatic. They returned to the coordinates. They dropped an ROV. They reported no anomalies. They clamped the cable. They finished the job. They came home. No one died. No one reported a mirror. Maybe the thing wasn't there anymore. Maybe it moved. Maybe flushing the transfer trunk didn't kill it, but just pushed it back where it wanted to be. Or maybe it learned something else that night and didn't need to show itself again. Because the ping never stopped for me. It's quieter now. It doesn't blast through speakers. It doesn't shake steel. But sometimes, late at night, when my apartment is silent and my mind is finally slipping towards sleep, I hear it in the pipes. Two quick. Pause. One long. Sometimes it comes from my phone speaker when the phone isn't even playing anything. A faint click-click, and then that long-held tone that feels like a breath. Sometimes I catch myself breathing in its rhythm while I'm washing dishes or staring at traffic, and I have to stop, force air in and out like I'm wrestling my own lungs. The worst was the first time it happened in the shower. The water hit my shoulders, warm, normal, and I relaxed for half a second because hot water is supposed to mean safety. Then the drain gurgled, and the gurgle fell into a pattern. Two quick. Pause. One long. I shut the water off so fast, I nearly tore the handle out of the wall. I sat on the bathroom floor, dripping, staring at the drain like it was a black eye looking up at me. I didn't call anyone. Who do you call? A plumber? A therapist? A priest? A company safety hotline? You can't report a rhythm. You can't file paperwork on a knock that lives in your breathing. So I'm telling you instead. Because the only thing Cal said that made any sense after all of it was that simple warning, don't listen to the knocks. And I keep thinking about what he meant by answer. Not with your voice, with your body, with your breath, with your attention. The ocean doesn't need you to open a door if it can teach you to become one.